Oh yeah, ta 상말로 뜻이 되래. 로산시를 다 안에 법이 소제기도 다 현다던데 지금도.
So anyway, test the leg, please, to everybody. Rinpoche has mentioned he can see Losang Sherab and Fabrizio.
Video cannot open.
Yeah. That, oh yeah. That is it.
Course is not allowing video.
Video is not open. The video is not open to everyone. You have to allow.
토마 카레스는 꾸는 주야체니. 아니 카레스는 디티고침베 최래. 대송인상. 아니 심지 탐지도 상계 고방. 츠딩에 두바 지기 대선도 대치에도 담배 취 생ኛ 받지. 아니 디 상계 초도도 송쇼 냠도.
No. Now, first of all, we need to have the motivation, the right motivation. And since this teaching is a Mahayana teaching, then please think to yourselves, for the sake of all the mother sentient beings, I must achieve enlightenment. And for that reason, I'm going to listen to these holy Dharma teachings. And then please, all together, we are going to recite the Sangye Chodang Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer. No.
Sangye Chodang Sogi Chonam La Chanju Bardu Dani
Jason Che Dai
Shi Give Chonam Rola Penjir Sangye Robara Show Sangye Chodang Sogi Chonam La Chanju Bardu Dani Jasu Dagi Chushi Give Chonam Rola Penjir Sangye Robara Show Sangye Chodang Sogi Chonam La Chanju Bardu Dani Jasu Dagi Chushi Give Chonam Rola Penjir Sangye Robara Show Magyunange Tarang Vesimje Tamanjegi Dano Tojalana Mevaya Tawazo Sange Yukomar Mujinega Tovas Techido Tambechu Samu Senge Bekunujuna Leba set up December Sech.
Please adjust your conduct and motivation thinking for the sake of all the mother sentient beings who are equal to the extent of space. I must by any means achieve the perfect state of precious complete enlightenment, and for that reason I'm going to listen to these holy Dharma teachings. No.
Yeah, that's right. Tirima Shwadi, Tadi Keseshu Tanda. Because I jumped over about that, then the landed was jumped the landed any like you chunga with your man. What a thing to see in Yamisha.
Now, the other day, yesterday, we reached the topic of refuge, and now today we're going to be looking at the verse that explains about karma and its results. And so this is a topic which belongs to the practices in common with the person of small capacity. No.
Last one. I don't know the only jump door, but jump the any Jidan the Tibuchum Shuna Sung or the Ina and Dita, any Tibuchum Sandy Kasore. Tanda di ta tibo chungre na sung yor di en di tibo chung da tumo sung yor tibo chung da tumo ding da tumo gibu chenbo se tu sung yor che za de song za changmei nyam ne gibu chenbo yin ne da gibu ding yin ne da gang ge jibo nyam ne chi wa chi tu se tu chen.
No. And now, although this topic of refuge, the one we left off at yesterday, even though it's explained in the section dealing with the practices of the person of small capacity, actually it's something. Refuge is a practice shared also with the person of middling capacity. So, in other words, the Hinayana, and also it's a practice shared with the person of great capacity or great capability. In other words, the Mahayana. No.
Yeah, what a Dinma, Tanda di Gibu Chungre, Gibu Chungu Go Shu, Gibu Chungu Da, Gibu Ding, Gibu Chambu Sajwa. What di any Tanda Gibu Chungu Chabina, any city to Namachi, Chima Penje, Java Chima, any Yason Modon, Yason Machim Cheje, and had me, Java Tonto Nijilla, Gibu Chungu Sri. That di Nangal the Yorala, so Chive to get a Yamishin to Tarade, or to Chibore.
Now, here, as I mentioned, this is explained amongst the practices of the person of small capability. And so, we have person of small capability, middling capability, great capability. So the person of small capability is a person who isn't interested in practicing Dharma just for this life, but is more interested in the future life, avoiding being born in the lower realms and making sure that they will be born in the realms of the humans and gods. So this kind of attitude, not being concerned with this life, more interested in the future life, this is something which is a Buddhist thing, but it's not uniquely Buddhist. It's also something that the non-Buddhists also practice. No.
Well, that means say Sangye Jonden Degi Chuzun de la Nangbal Karesana. Gibu Chungu Rangzama Chene, Gibu Chungu Jigo to be a church, Zane Mare, Karesana de Sambang Jangure, Alengel Tabamato in a Tibarolia, Neson Madon Che, and had me, then Rush Tobiak, Meltidis, or Gibu Chungu that in the Remado. Just on a Shaviama, Karesana Sangye Jonden Degi, Hovale, then Tarwal, Tabelang, then Stangari, Nan Kill, Tabelang, then because I tell you. 타바키라 라레 시버지 손 타르바토베시 손레 다 내가 그래서 기부 충무 디 그래서는 아니 타와마도 봐도 덴르덴 타베하지 덴르덴 귀니 에나 타발이야 티야지 어디레레마도 기부 충무라 기부 랑자말레 샤야 난걸이야마
No. The difference between the Buddhist attitude and non-Buddhist attitude is that in the case of the Buddhist teachings, the way that the Buddha taught, there's no practice which is really small capacity practice. Rather, everything is taught in order to achieve liberation and enlightenment. So in other words, the Buddha came to the world and taught so that sentient beings would be able to achieve liberation and enlightenment. And in the meantime, in order to be able to achieve that kind of goal, you need to avoid being born in the lower realms, and you need to make sure that you're born as a human being or as a god. And for that reason, these teachings are given so that the main goal is liberation, but for the time being, one needs to practice engage in these practices which are in common with the person of small capability. No.
What is it? Takanda the Sanje Goma Tuntu Yengi Nengelia or Shendun to Sanje Goma Tobalangelia, Q Dink of Nijong Google. Koba Tata Ningu Map. Any what till a Tandu running Gange Kazeto. The Rangdenglia and Dungi the Shep Chenny, and running Tandu di. You wouldn't drink somebody. What a ding el Guyo. You wouldn't drink somebody el Guyo.
And then besides that, in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, we need renunciation, which means seeing that there's no essence at all in all of cyclic existence. So this involves thinking about the suffering of cyclic existence with reference to oneself, just like the way the person of, the actual person of middling capability would meditate and the kind of insight that they would need. No.
알았어. 제장 신 동행 나와 마세베 자와 니지 심부 깨발라 녜래야 랑 코베나 동행 마세베 빌레 탕도 그로 녜를 거래 되면은 랑 켜네 코베나 강에다 빌레 탕도 그로 자와지 매버지라 신은 동행 나와 코발이야 탕도 다 딘데 니지 이게 타발 거야 니지 이런도 거래요 말이야 제가 그래서나 아니 기부 침별 남양의 신이 녜래야 기분 랭이 올로 장야도 고야 제가 정말 왔어 되게
And so, just like in the case of the person of small capability, where we talk about the practices in common with the person of small capability, also here we talk about the practices which are in common with the person of middling capability. In other words, which the person that's practicing the Mahayana, they also have to train their mind. So what this means is that, and if you're, when we're practicing the Mahayana, of course, we need to generate compassion. Well, you can't have compassion for others until, first of all, you've understood your own suffering situation and you've found that unbearable. If you don't see that, and if you don't have the wish for liberation from that, then there's no way that you're going to be able to generate compassion. And it's for this reason that if you're a Mahayana practitioner, you need to engage in those practices which are in common with the person of middling capability. No.
그렇잖아. 나 단다 되는마 디슈고인다 단다. 지금 개발도 개발티.
No.
신도 세계 년송 동년남 이게 레긴 되고 특별송. 이제 살아 하냐. 이게 남의 미시 개설하는 인스.
No. Now we're going to keep going with the text. We're on verse 8. And so this verse says, the subduer said that all the unbearable suffering of the three lower realms is the fruition of wrongdoing. Therefore, never committing negative deeds, even at peril to one's life, is the Bodhisattva's practice. No.
그렇잖아. 아디 칭리르시나. 신도 써가스. 남이 동이 신도 써봐 까베. 아니 가서 오래. 까베. 다 초바 배 동네 타고 유행이 냐바 이다 돈도 되게 숨어봐 당에 손잖아. 어디 되게 숨디 동네 되게 용야디 가려서나. 다 되게 동네 가려서나. 다가 두자만에 매버치. 게임 매버치. 딘데 체제 녀손 중얼에서 말했어. 딘데스 놔야디. 아니 미국을 줄 수. 다간다 딕벨레 되고 스트레스 딕버체베 딕버스기로 봐 딕버 소나마 이벨레 디체벤 제불이 있은 제불 딕버체벤 제불 냐바이다 돈도 스케브레스 뷰티송.
What this is talking about is the unbearable suffering, which is the ripening result of negative actions. So when it talks about these unbearable suffering, it's talking particularly about the very powerful suffering feelings that we experience in the lower realms. And that suffering, why does it happen? How does it happen? Well, it's not something that happens without any kind of cause and without any kind of condition at all. Rather, it happens as a result of our own evil actions. In other words, for example, engaging in the 10 non-virtues, creating, in other words, demeritorious karma. No.
어디 두세래. 제가 말아서 단다. khobaliyore tendu re di ne tal personam le sa ne tendu ke diyor ba ta nge son tele dugur ba ine tindir se ya de khobe na ya de karesna nganzo sangge shingam be ngone ta ne ge 동행 기 민정 khosamya ba oda ngone be 대원 버시 롱제사 oda tindir ke ga na chi sa kuju sogi me tindir ji le be 기부체 대대지라 Sama Gebi in also tas Simji in it, Tishingam Jil, Gibu Jil, Yevache. Tenema Shantar Jigi, Ma, Mishanda in the Jig, Zaman Tanje, Mayusha, also the mother wishing, Tindasavan and Marwa. Also Tindis Magia, the rang less than Devulia, Quava Gebi. Jazan, the great leg in the wood, to be songs, what did Devulis? Also Quava get Quave less son to give this. Hindevulis, rang less.
No. Right now, although we are still in cyclic existence, we're still in samsara, but still, anyway, we are in the, we are human beings. We have the pleasant, good rebirth, good life as a human being or as a god. So it's not like, I mean, if you consider the Pure Lands, the Buddha Pure Lands, where there's not even the name suffering, where you have no suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Everything is all very conducive. Everything is very nice. So it's not like we were thrown down by somebody into this suffering life, into this samsara. Rather, according to the Buddha, in the Buddha's teachings, he himself said that all of this comes as a result of our own negative karma, the karma that we ourselves created. No.
Jazan Lende Sandi and Kashi Kelling Yomas. Lende Kelling it and Maris, Lende Kelling it, Ke Maling is Shigdua. The Lende Sadi Ke Lang the Malan Kishamari, who wins Kemalana Yore. This one is any this one's on Tasangi this one, Chazan, teacher, solar powjan, the Gele Namamishi Gesela means the Gele Machi, Stakanda, Namba Sangevgina, Mikujubu Surunti. Rabdo Choma Inenda, Rabdo Majone, Sangwe Sungu, the Ranga came into it. Montosana.
Now, there are some people that accept karma and its results and some people that don't. But actually, it's not a question of whether you accept it or not. It's just a fact. Karma and its results. It's just what happens. And so for this reason, the Buddha taught that we shouldn't engage in negative actions, non-virtuous actions, even at the cost of our life. And so when we talk about negative actions, we are mainly talking about the 10 non-virtues, which are actions, negative actions, whether you're a monastic or a lay person, and they are to be avoided, whoever you are. No.
Takanda any Taba Tobala, Chugnelu, Nyabato, Nyabato, Chugnelu, then the Tongwetunda, Tongwatin Sati, we need to rela the Shewo. Yinayan Tava Motobe, Narudo Karagursan, Ale, Nyazon make it. Nyazoma give a Tamango, around to Ale Mende, Chipudicele, and Le Caresanabe, Polycube, and be big. The Jaya keep a level. But because the stimuli that was size, Tindig Tamango yard, is not in the Rava. Inea, Gion Chena, any Mikijubonki, Sudum Society, Mikijubon, Mikiva Suda, Mikiva, Keva Maiba, then Katakan. Or Kandasana, Kevachu, or the teacher who is this one, teacher and Kadasana, any Negum de command. Then it digania. Dagarana Tabamatovine, Mundo Goma unit Taba Yasoya, what in this year, Toshina.
Now, in order to achieve liberation from cyclic existence, it is a fact that we do need to realize the actual, the ultimate way of being of all phenomena. We do need to understand emptiness. We need to understand how being empty supports being a dependent arising. Being dependent arising supports being everything being empty. So these are things that we do have to know. However, in the meantime, we need to create virtue and avoid non-virtue to make sure that we can achieve that goal. So we have many ways of there are many virtuous activities we can engage in, like, for example, when we make mandala offering, then when you you're able to create the unbelievable causes to become a Chakravartin king, in other words, a wheel-turning king, wheel-turning monarch. However, in general, the main thing for us to do is to practice the morality of abandoning non-virtue, in particular the morality of abandoning the 10 non-virtues. So, and then in this way, by practicing that kind of morality, that will make sure that in the meantime, temporarily, we will be able to make sure of being born as a human being or as a god, so which is a birth of high status. And then eventually, of course, if we're able to achieve liberation in this life, that's one thing. But if we're not able to achieve liberation in this life, then our practice of morality will make sure that until that time, when we achieve liberation, we'll continue to be born as a human and as a god. No.
Oh, yeah. 나들래야 내 자왕아와 침을 숨지도 대가래서나 도스레 문제 미기 투이 녀선도 동이 미세 녀와 대 처음에 다니 닝라 루바 렉조데 문제 댄상도시 현대 남스 송샤 나디 가래서나 문제 당마마 가서다 미거버 챤이 디 제불이야 아니 그 동이 미세바 창내 대바 집에 양말을 사 다디 디그를 사 다디 쳐버시 사 동인 용야 그래서 다 동이 될 수 있냐 다디 쳐서 다 가르스는 닝을 로조です닝을 띠네 저기 뭔데 된사 이게 예선마게 내가 뭔데 고마 뭔데 된사 좀 타버도 쓰고요 어디체 다 현대남 상당히 연계 다 이게 공부 시기 연세 어디체 되나스
There is a verse that was taught by or composed by His Holiness the Fifth Dalai Lama. So he says that in the past, because we were so fond of non-virtuous actions, we've already experienced so much suffering, incredible amount of suffering already. And he says, so then he says, so now that's enough. So that's enough. Now, if you're able to think, then what you should do is make sure to put all of your effort into avoiding being born in the lower realms and making sure that you will be born in the happy realms as a human being or as a god. No.
나 간다. 말한소 숨베지네. 아니 비게 나남쇼쇼 디걸 컴비 인상. 아니 비게 딱 비게 디걸 레체는 두르 봐. 나 대조 그래서나 디걸 레체버들이야. 아니 직 가서 오래. 나 지단 레 삽진 쳐발이야. 미게 벨레서다. 개발 레체버다 디고 다래. 미게 벨라야. 제발라 정말 죽숨스다. 시 삼바 줘봐. 아니 죽세 상비는 되고 삽진 주주진 삽진 차로. 제가 인신 매직 같은 마상을 쏘고. 가다 주대 이라 마셔지. 개버치나 개버 주주이나 가버치나 단 릭스. 미거버다 지금 드마선 체체. 가다 디 개버치 하셔 봐. 근데 저는 꼭 남이 주주 차로. 어찌돼. 니네 아니 디과 가르쳐는다 간다 미시버래 다 미시버 망을 봐. 다 디선 인상 아니 중나 이게 창고래. 광다 이게 간다 중나네 가마마 때문에 니 쓰지 이게 참 이게 디 상계 탐지기 비기 닝부래 이거 다 응원해 타네 어디 제위나 남이 자원은 요 뭐체 맵이네 가다 배 태가치스 이거 피규어 봐 어디 딘데체 가다 디고 다 루요 어디서 개천 버려
Generally, whoever we are, naturally, because of having such a strong habit, we have a tendency to engage in so much non-virtuous karma, sinful karma. And then in the case of virtue, that's one thing. But in the case of non-virtue, for the non-virtuous karma to be complete, there are 4 factors that you would need present, which is the basis, the attitude, the action, and the completion. And if all of those 4 are present, then even if the negative karma itself was quite a small one, the result becomes huge. It's as if you've done something really huge. So for this reason, we need to make sure that the karma, when we do engage in negative karma, that those 4 factors are not complete. And so what that would mean is, just like in the case of virtue, your karma becomes stronger when at the end you think, oh, that was very good, that was a good thing to do, you're very pleased with what you did. Then you can stop your non-virtue from being complete by thinking straight away, oh, this wasn't good, I shouldn't have done that. And then that really makes that karma much weaker or much less. And then besides that, if we can, what would be good is if at the end of each day we recite the 100-syllable Bodhisattva mantra. It would be good if we can to do 21 recitations of that. And this is really quite an amazing mantra because it's the essence of all enlightened beings, like the condensation of all enlightened beings to purify negative karma. And by reciting this mantra, even if you're not able to purify your negative karma completely, you will be able to stop it from increasing in power. And so anyway, in either way, reciting this mantra does purify our negative karma. No.
我都觉得，我的确，他看到，地质中了，老是准备还的钱呢，他做一家的，你钱呢已经不得当年的要了吧？这种我们谈那个，他被修开不来，我的son着，这当穷人呢的，被已经不得这把谈别呢，这种这个怎么能把谈出来？我能谈那个，听这朋友的，这son一张。 今天难过的，你喜欢啥？这个车把的邻居们就这么说什么去？给我车的开心不的？今天给我车的，商业的情绪上吧，大家能行，让的先把他忙过这个，他给我情绪忙过了嘛？给我就是搞我工把的一样事。这的他那个人个，也个路开的车呢，省得了，他趁我们都买这么吃平嘛，都省得了呀，开的也个车呢。 我得搞个工，他听得要不下去，对，给我群居见面呢，搞个工具，让给我了。之前呢，是不是给我骗着呢？我一人光把它给刚给要嘛了吧，搞个工把刚给要嘛了吧，我就是没谁给偷，被其他偷开了，不行。
And so, as I just mentioned, there is the Vajrasattva practice, which mainly means reciting the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. So this is very powerful, very effective for purifying negativities, negative actions, and obscurations. And in fact, there are some that recite 100,000 of these mantras. And so somebody who does that is really very wise because if you, especially, if you do it properly, if you do the practice properly, then you purify all of your root downfalls. So this is really quite amazing. Then besides that, we need to, in relation to all negative karma, then to help purify it, we need regret. We must develop regret for the negative actions that we have done. So that's one thing. Then besides that, it's really very good to rejoice, to practice rejoicing, which means thinking of all of the good things that are being done or have been done by all of the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, and also other beings, anybody other than oneself, and also thinking about the good things that we've done and thinking how wonderful that is, how good that is. So rejoicing in it. And particularly, the things that we can remember doing in this very lifetime. Of course, we can't remember what we've done in past lives, but we know what we've done in this life. So thinking about that and rejoicing. So this is a way in which our virtue increases immensely. And it's also something which involves no hardship, isn't it? There's no hardship in rejoicing. So this is a really important practice to do. No. And if you look at this subject of karma in the stages of the path teachings, then you find there's an explanation of how karma increases. Sorry, how karma is definite, how karma increases, how you don't experience the results of the actions which you haven't done, and how once you've created karma, then the result is never lost. So the main points about karma are summarized into those 4 points, and that's very important to understand. No. So anyway, up to here then has been an explanation of the practices in common with the person of small capability. No. Now we'll move on to the practices in common with the person of middling capability. And in fact, there is just this one verse for that. So the verse goes, so this is verse 9, right? Verse 9. The pleasure of the triple world, like a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass, is imperiled in a single moment. Striving for the supreme state of never-changing liberation is the Bodhisattva's practice. No. Now, it says in this verse, you see, it says the triple world. So normally when it says the triple world, it refers to the 3 realms. In other words, the realm of desire, then there's the form realm and formless realm. There are some in certain contexts you see it describe these 3 explained as meaning the gods, humans, and nagas. But in any case, what this is talking about is all the different types of existence of the different sentient beings. No.
그래서는 삭제게 되어버려. 삭제 되어. 대화 하장 그 충중 뒤주체는 뒤주 하장 그 틴드 그래서는 짜질 수 있으신 배틀에 배 큐즈마도 매봐.这里 시버디 쇼게 유도你们为什下午的朗上我买不清楚吧？哦，这电脑线朗上这个装着呀，要不群居，别的突出群居，卡给啥子对吧？我听得这种，你怎么去？
No, this verse is saying that all of the happiness of psychic existence, all of the happiness in the three realms, is contaminated. So it's not real happiness, it's contaminated happiness. And it doesn't last for a long time. So it lasts for a moment. And it's just like a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass, which evaporates very quickly once the sun appears. So just like that, the happiness that we experience in psychic existence is over in a moment. No.
我的这这张语种是个级别确信因素。我快别那个对吧？肯定级别呢，确实了怕严重呀。听这个确信的，或者人性大概的，实际对吧？的是，这张听了呀，插心间，我的第一团大了，第不少语言嘛的说，
And it says there, doesn't it, is imperiled in a single moment. It means that it disappears in a single moment. So that's the very nature of all of the happiness of psychic existence. It's over in a single moment. It's its nature because it's contaminated. So contaminated happiness is like that. And therefore, what it says in this verse is that we should not be attached to it and create negative karma in order to achieve it. No.
yeah. 的确，南面民族台湾王朝都能有介绍来是，这张但对南面有门间，对吧？地基人有门间，你他说啥图是呢？他地基别还想强迫，绝对没吧？哦，地基的这个。地内地基他买不起啥，地库早还买吧，等给对吧？我的son上，他地，肯定也回来是，快被地基的各个群居，居住群的各个面一些，这团的嘛有些就做特别，这个对吧？团的人呢，就不早的面见，等给对吧的，现在这团的人呢，你从跨不领也吧就，跨不哪呢？地基买不的写不起呢，我他不特别，你从结婚是。 타바 던등이야 니준 쓰여 봐. 가네 게 줬으면 kho발에 게 봐줘. 가왕에 봐 중서나 타바. 어디 니준 게스.
And then it says striving for the supreme state of never changing liberation. So what this means is that when you achieve liberation, then the happiness you experience never changes. It's the happiness and joy is immense. It's inexpressible. It never ends, and so this kind of happiness is something we need to really focus our attention on and take a great interest in. So by understanding, in other words, the happiness of psychic existence is so insignificant, and also it lasts for such a short time, whereas the happiness of liberation is unending. It's so immense, and so what this is saying is we need renunciation. So renunciation, ngejung, more literally its meaning is like the definite emergence, definitely emerging, or definitively emerging. Emerging from what? Emerging from samsara. So when we talk about renunciation, what we're talking about really is the wish to emerge from samsara, to achieve liberation. So it's the same as the wish to achieve liberation. So we need to develop that that determination. No.
Yeah, what's that? Modice. Takanda. Lusu name. And Kobena Kangi Kazendo. When a tanic, any biggie, girl could to be somewhat. When a tanic cobbling ever join, till a talk was Raymando. Savanate Kobena de Ashrayo. Chetan, the cobble in the charity, Nergo at 100 shabbos. Moribe wonk. We need to miss one cobble to never. Chetan Morip. Chetan Ma Ripas. Titi Casori, Gari Yakshavati. Kari Mason Rikurta, Rikui Shikin. Kari was an Tinjung Tabati. Then join. What did Jenny? Any Karismata Kobal Tawala in Jimmy Jiggy, Rikui Shiki Kurva, what ended this quiet radio.
Thinking, therefore, of the suffering of cyclic existence, all the faults of psychic existence. So when you really sort of look objectively at samsara, you can see that's what it is. It's full of suffering. It's nothing. It's full of faults, and so we need this attitude of renunciation. The mind wanting to definitely emerge from, definitely leave psychic existence, achieve liberation. The mind that doesn't want to stay any longer in psychic existence. And so then what we need to know is how it came about. How does samsara happen? So the answer to that is ignorance. The actual source of our psychic existence is ignorance. So ignorance, so it means not knowing, a lack of awareness. So what we need to overcome this ignorance is awareness, in the sense of wisdom, and particularly the kind of wisdom we need is the understanding of dependent arising. No.
Yeah, that the Kudulia, any big castle. You drink Kudulia. And so the machine matriku, Jana, Dishin and got ship. Oh, you drink that also to get young so Dishin and got water Jana, the machine. But under the Karsa Season Deva, that's a situation, using the Jibuchi in Sandy, the machine Nangi, Dungi Dembata, Gunjo Demba, or Titing. Now I mean, you Tabe Deva, Tony of Jesselani Sadi, any because I'm walking down Lamdini. What do you think? That the share the catching body.
No. When you're engaging in the practices in common with the person of middling capacity, middling capability, then what you need is to understand the vital points of the Four Noble Truths. And in fact, in this verse, it talks about the Four Noble Truths, because when it says the pleasure of the triple world is like a dewdrop on the tip of a blade of grass, which is going to vanish in a moment, that's talking about the first two of the Four Noble Truths. It's talking about the truth of suffering and the truth of the origin of suffering. And then when it says striving for the supreme state of never changing liberation, that's talking about the second pair of the two truths, the third and fourth noble truths, the truth of cessation and the truth of the path. So this is really quite important to be aware of. No.
Oh yeah. Oh, Sanjay Jomden Degita. Ne Warna Celia, Tango, a chew call Big Casori. Sonia di Dambashi Sonova. Konga de Sambota, Michan, Konga de Sambota, a high giddy. Laya, any this one, the Harrison, Toma, didn't do near Pagway Dabo, didn't Gujo Pagway Dabo, Cheche. Ali Big took the Sonova. What this one is any or to do the Chatan did that Shanty. Catching Bashitari. Maran's Sunda Chine, Dungin Duguamare. 먼저 동해 만들어서 做 가르쳐서는 가르쳐 버렸잖아. 상로다에 단 지딘 디가는 망셰 가르쳐서는 동해 삼단이요. 동해. 배 강에 챈 배 야는 내 나자 야는 배원에 타네 신 거다 교조서 배원에 타네 강에 침부터 어디 지금 봐. 아 얘네야 상계 좀 되게 소한테 나서 남배당 게 쪼디 되려야 말해. 동해사한테 대당 단단히 코베나게 대화자서 사이 호텔이야 템포 매서 사제 대화텔라 규비 동해스고 한 윤도니 템포 매니 동해 아니 규비 동해스 니샤 다디 시저럽디 용야도 그래서나 디니 동해 파고에 템포 상계 좀 되게 디 송아 디 말한서 사제 녀리 풍부디 어디 유비 인상 어디 유비 인상 어디 켜버도 just 동의 손디 사진에는 풍부도 커발집이 동의 거다 동의기 때문에 어내 동의 파고 있다 뭐 어제 켜버도 제 동의 방거래서 또 뒤송을 도시나
the Buddha the first thing that the Buddha taught which was at Varanasi in India. So the first thing he taught was these four noble truths. Who he taught it to in terms of human beings was a group of 5 disciples, and there were also 80,000 gods listening to the teaching. And so what he taught was this is suffering true for an Arya, which another, or maybe you can put it like this: this is suffering which is true for an Arya. This is the origin which is true for an Arya, and so forth. So anyway, the first thing he taught was about the truth of suffering. This is suffering which is true for an Arya. And this is really important for us to understand. Suffering is, in other words, is very important for us to understand, because no one wants suffering. And yet when you look around this world, you see that mainly all you can see is suffering. And there are 3 types of suffering. So the first one is called the suffering of suffering. So what we normally regard as suffering, like the suffering of physical pain, the suffering of being criticized and so forth. That's the suffering of suffering, but that's not the main thing that the Buddha was talking about. Then there's, so besides that suffering of suffering, there's also the suffering of change, which is talking about the happiness we experience in cyclic existence, how that's subject to change. And then the basis of that is the main thing, the basis of those 2 types of suffering, the suffering of suffering and the suffering of change. When the Buddha said, this is suffering true for an Arya, when he used the word this, that word referred to our contaminated, appropriated aggregates, so contaminated, appropriated aggregates. And he was talking about the suffering of having those aggregates. And this is something, this kind of suffering, which is the basis of the other 2, is something that we have wherever we're born in psychic existence. No.
뭐도잖아. 달라. 지당김. 나라서 미네, 둘이네. 순리시네. 아니 왜게 가서 오래. 삭제 코베난 그 삭제기 대바치어 봐. 단다 디네 처리송 유배 동의 사티. 어디 삭제 대바디 에는 뭐 거로. 디는 뭐 다니. 에는 뭐네 타네 가르스나 동의 베티. 대바 춘주될 때 대베디 뭐하니 디베 동의 침보사 동의 유의를 못 써야. 어디네 전에 대용 거야. 디 유배 동의 봐. 미시바 전에. 얘네야 단단하라서 나머지고 말해. 아니 현다 단다. 취지 현다. 그래서 유배 동의 때문에 매봐. 다시 전에 신기요. 이 가르스나 그 군이 동행 요구도 제제 규배 동행 그 사제 기백이 대바티 대바랑 좀 많이 봐 신기해요. 얘네야 이 짜바티 남과상계선 짜바디 켜버두지 동행 켜버두지 켜버스도 잠바 아니 그게 khoba 탐절 시버전에 이제 만남에 봐도 첩되니 강가 이어봐 누지 스도 잠바 오다 가서 오래 단대 동에게 땡징이 사제 년龄 풍부스요 다제 년龄게 땡징이 마오바 동에 강가 난den게 응에메 동에 파니 다 동에 강가 있는 열어봐 사제 년齡 풍부대 제단 대선자 누지 강가 주루루 써셔봤었지 동에 강가 어디 네 방자인 거 시고 네 단다 동영 못해나 어디 동이 봐 못 쳐고 그렇잖아.
Yes, in general, whether we're a human being, whether we're a god, whatever kind of sentient being we are, then any kind of happiness we experience is contaminated happiness, and it's what we call the suffering of change. So as I mentioned, 3 types of suffering. So it's the second one, the suffering of change. And mostly all of us, all we ever think about all the time is this suffering of change. That's what we strive for. And in order to get it, then we create the causes for so much suffering, which lasts for such a long time, great suffering that lasts such a long time, because we don't understand that it's actually nothing but suffering of change. And this is something that we can understand, though, if we think about it. We can see that it is subject to change, that it's not real happiness. So then the third type of suffering, the third of the 3 types of suffering, is what we call the pervasive compounded suffering. So it's called pervasive because it's a type of suffering that everybody in cyclic existence has, and then it's called compounded or compounding because it's the basis of all kinds of experience of suffering that we have in the present. It's the result. It causes the suffering that we're going to experience in the future, and it's the result of the past. Aggregates, suffering aggregates. So this is why it's called the compounded. So this is the third one. This is the main one to understand. No.
네, 어떻잖아. 제가 다디 되게 가서 그래. 처버 두지 동의 때 매우 소고는 티 컨데 총거래. 아주 사제 년에 분부 컨데 총거래. 컨데 총거래서는 네 kho발 깨비 인상. 다다디 땡데 이나 중에 깨봐. 가서 주버 깨봐 송고 봐. 어디서는 깨비 인상. 아니 동의 관계 땡도 좀 그래. 제가 네 컨데 총거래서는 깨야 돼. 컨데 총거래서는 간다 처음에 머리가 다다디 가서 그래. 땡데 이나 중에는 처음에 머리가 당고 영향 kho발 깨야 그 고르거든 머리가 지송으로 봐. 딱 간다. 머리가 왕기 아니 그게 가서 니바 레레 차단이 거네 레사니 kho발기야 레사니 다 가르스나 아니 kho발기야 그게 남시 때문에 바자샤니 kho발기가 열어봐 뒤선다 다 가르고 그랬잖아 단다 델라 뒤송으래 남의 민교 탑에 대바초 동등이가 계산하는 있어 남의 민교 탑에 대바서 그게 타바된 고바샤니 아니 대바시나 고바샤 전동이야 봤어도 람덴샤 어디 냐면 챘네 어디 콜 방고 그랬어 뒤송으래 도잖아
So yeah, we have this pervasive compounded suffering. We need to understand how it comes about. We need to understand where it comes from. So now, actually, where it comes from, if we think in terms of the 12 links, is because of the birth link, which is, I think, the 10th link. Anyway, so because of that. So where, again, in terms of the 12 links, so then if you thinking in terms of the 12 links again, the first one, where they all come from, is the first one, ignorance. So we're born in psychic existence. That's why we have this suffering, and that comes from ignorance. And so because of ignorance, motivated by ignorance, then we create karma. Then the potential that's created by that karma is left on the consciousness and so forth. And so the Buddha taught that we should strive for liberation, which is the same as the truth of cessation, when we talk about the cessation, by practicing the path that overcomes that ignorance. No.
This one, 머리고 단다디 과배 잡아 머리고 인도 삼바 가리 머리 그래 머리 그랬잖아 뭐이 내주 최근 내가 내로 뭐마티 미신배 왕기 애는 간도 과가 참아요 그래 종래 제장 노래 지송으로 와 가서 그래 동거 시와 개와 매배주 미시배는 로와 참교와 대다 투정하게 탑주던 리고 자다근 주반세스 다 가래서나 최근 내로 동보다 띵중 동보 띵중 이미지 어디 띵베 미시베 고왕게 로가 되게 간가 과발 참 동에 나서 그냥 그랬어 재정 상계 좀 되대 탑을 켜봐디 아니 아래 뒤에 컴도 매벌 되니 가래서나 타라 이 최근 내로 시야 채도 아래 주전 라면도送네 간다 타라 최근 내로디 떠니 탑에 고마 강 타발이야 꺼야지 어디를 나가래서 도잖아
So the cause of all this, then the root and the source of all this suffering is ignorance. And so now the thing is, then, if we say it's ignorance, well, ignorance of what? It's not ignorance. It means like not knowing what. What is it that we don't know? So what it is that we don't know is the actual nature, the actual ultimate reality of phenomena. It's because of not understanding that we wander in psychic existence. And so it's like it says in the sutras, the Buddha taught in the sutras, that because the sentient beings don't understand how everything is empty, peaceful, and unborn, that they wander in psychic existence, and therefore the Buddha, out of compassion, with the wisdom, understanding the different capacities of the different sentient beings, taught the antidote to the ignorance which causes the sentient beings to remain in psychic existence, which is understanding how everything is empty and everything is a dependent arising. He taught various methods in accordance with the various capacities of sentient beings so that they would all be able to achieve liberation. So anyway, I don't know if I got that a bit mixed up in the end, but in other words, the Buddha, seeing that the sentient beings suffering in psychic existence out of ignorance, taught emptiness so that they would be able to gain liberation. No.
알았어. 제장 그런 거 전다 있는다. 생각 전다 있는다. 간다. 이게 상계 좀 되게 추도 님고 송해야 돼. 아니. 이게 가서 추근내로 동거니 사대. 현다 수지 뭐 송. 띵중 동배 전다. 동거 띵중 사송 봐. 어디 이지 미지 시해야 돼.
And now whether we're thinking just of ourselves or whether we're thinking of others, then what we need to do is to practice the essence of the Buddha's teachings. And the essence of the Buddha's teaching is that everything is empty and everything is dependent arising. So this is what we need to understand. No.
창마 띵중래 가서 오래 강지 띵중 마인베 처가 요 많이 봤어 왔다 컨디지네 띵중 마인 그 직장 요 말해서 난과 제가 뭐 내주래 돼 다들 매도를 시나 매도 산디 매도 가방도선 대도시 조구조구로 봐 이나한테 매도를 왜서나 파도 제비나 아니 디 매도 로마리 디 매도게 아니 비게 양가리 디 카다 딘데체니 담아네 마체니 니그 말와 다 간다 디게 지기지글 땐 지지 땐니 디부터 매도 된도지 매도 대 투거라 봐 고 가르선 땐니 고 라마이나 고 지겐 또고 말와 뭐 딘데 많이 배체제 땐니 예비 인상 딘중스
Everything is a dependent arising. So according to the Buddha's teachings, there is nothing which is not a dependent arising. And if we look at this in terms of a flower, for example, so generally speaking, if somebody says, where's the flower, you can point it and say, it's over there. But then when you look further, asking yourself, is the petal the flower? Is the leaf the flower? Is the stalk the flower? And so forth. There's nothing that you can find. There's nothing you can point out and say, this is the flower. And yet it does exist. And how it exists is dependently. It exists depending upon others. It's not independent. If it was independent, it wouldn't have to be related to or rely upon anything else, would it? So it's dependent. It exists dependently. No.
어떠잖아. 어디지? 나 간다. 띵중 임바 동의 내주디 띵중 임바디 상당이지나. 내가 가서 그래. 나랑서 가르치네. 대바다 동에 또 타버 주베리. 저서 가가. 규진 망고실 때니. 질 때니. 유여거래 마도 그 찌그란 찌게 그게 조존이. 나 동의 전이 네 세제 간다 지금 투야 되듯이 용구야 말. 가르서는 배 그게 뭐이 내수 시비에서 구양 못 찬. 어떠지? 내가 위에 편도 첨벌해.
Actually, everything is dependent arising. And so everything depends upon many other factors. And when you understand this, somehow your mind becomes like open and relaxed. Because, for example, when you're experiencing suffering, you won't have the tendency to point at one single source of your suffering. You'll understand that it came about through depending upon many different causes and conditions. And so even in the short term, understanding dependent arising is very helpful. No.
못하잖아. 뭐든지. 다 간다. 아니 상마 띵중이 다 띵중산데 가려서는 현왕서. 先对你要吧，先王因被因啥？那让王给买吧，让王是多，让王给买吧，就当人心买吧，那让我那买是芒果送个地呢，让王给买吧，先王的让王听你不得多少了吧？我让王给咋呢？让王买个的，人心买吧，让我那买，看到东北你啥对的，就说着，丁中可把强了，东北你可把。동원이 비게 고바다 비게 못 쳐야지 땐데요.
Then so everything is dependent arising. So when we say everything is dependent arising, that means everything is dependent on others. Nothing is independent or autonomous. So we can understand this because being dependent and being independent, they're the complete opposite, aren't they? And so when we say everything is empty, what that means is everything is empty of independent existence, empty of any kind of independent nature. And so for this reason, then, when you can understand dependent arising, when you can understand everything is dependent, this definitely will make it possible for you to understand how everything is empty. No.
그렇잖아. 제가 모두 과배 잡아온 미시버티. 그 비게 방고. 대방원은 인지 미지기. 아니 가르고래서나. 내로 시험발라. 땡제 된다 시험고래. 땡중. 제가 내로 떠야라. 내로 비게 떠야 리버만 고요. 가서 오래. 아니 귤어져 도지 세메 땡데서 아니 가서 먹을 줘 봐. 어찌 둘이 땡서 다 간다 땡데시 땡지 망고요. 타신과야 땡지 요래디 리베게고 땡지 땡지 산디 학과비나 동원이 다가랑 고토비야. 냥가 매봐. 딱지 탈론 녀매 오늘 타니原来매나디 띵중지 거들. 제가 제단이 집에 가서래. 디질 땡데도 왜 털래? 세제. 추근내로 떠야 땡데도 왜 털래? 땡데도. 지난 전에 가르스 그 디제는 디그리디네 땡데스한테 내가 친구시라니.
Now, so there's this ignorance, which means like not understanding, not knowing. So that not knowing, that lack of understanding is something we need to get rid of. And how to get rid of it is by understanding dependent arising. And so you see, there are many reasons, or let's say, there are many lines of reasoning that we can follow in order to establish that everything is empty. Like there's the diamond slivers reasoning and so forth. There are these various types of reasoning, and of all those, the main one, the best, is the reasoning of dependent arising, which is called the king of reasons. So it's very very effective way for to understand emptiness. Understanding dependent arising really brings you very close to understanding emptiness, and through using the reasoning of dependent arising, also there's no risk of falling to either of the two extremes, the extreme of the eternalist or permanent extreme and the nihilist extreme. No.
뭐도잖아. 어디서 다 간단 데서 뭐란저 전주쌤이 개발에 다 데서 해침버래. 빼나 참바도 인지 개발 선전. 참바 인지 개발라. 땡저게 내가 하고나. 아니 랑게 디기디 현라 또 거야. 심지 현라 땡이 용 거야. 디체비네 NB게 참바 개야. 다 그래서나 아니 동네서야 랑 동네 만들어 인자 현 동네 누구 말씀. 어디 땡저 디체니 참바 인지 전주쌤 개 간가 어디 원문 넘보이나 될 때는 연구를 무슨 거야. 뭐 내주 다 다가래야 됐었잖아.
Actually, for meditating on bodhicitta, it's very helpful if you understand dependent arising. So to develop bodhicitta, we need loving kindness and compassion. And understanding dependent arising helps us with that, because, for example, we will understand that our happiness depends completely upon others, and so forth. So that kind of insight you get through reflecting on dependent arising helps you to develop loving kindness and compassion. So this is particularly, in the case of the person of sharp faculties, the understanding of dependent arising is very helpful for being able to develop those qualities, loving kindness, compassion, and so on.
되는 거라서 다들 제 뒤내가 재미네. 아니 김상지가 나리네. 라디기 되버래. 제가 디기디 김상 대나게 파마다 사장다 다가나시 다 간다 간가 떠고 그러봐. 대선자 아니 비게 떠고 봐 타고나 삼로 고양을 열어라. 안 비게 참지게야. 그 가르선배 뭐 니즈 어디 김상지가 나래 뭐 니즈랑 디기 시행되고 위해서 땡데 된다 상다나 아니 뭐 니즈 체제 비게 심지 상하요. 야가 이거 당연히 지연의 제비는 알아서 구유 송겹살 시기도 와 koyu songyo di koyu di ngaranzo tel tengu koyu tene sogu te sonda 라 디기 영화 될 때는 용 제가 고유 송교 제과야 오 다간다 참지 제과 도서 간가 오 땡땡이 내로 시에나 아니 고 내가 위네 센들이 있네 사무 고양하지 거의 뭐 내서 야가
Even this life is helped by understanding dependent arising. So we will understand, like for example, at home, we all want happiness. That's quite natural. So you understand that because of your understanding of dependent arising, how everything depends upon other factors. So you realize that your happiness depends upon everybody at home, your parents, children, partner, whatever, it depends upon them. So understanding that, your mind becomes more sort of like relaxed and open. And not only that, but you feel more loving kindness towards the people at home, and you feel more compassion towards them. So really, the understanding dependent arising makes the mind something better, something more positive. Then we also talk about taking care of the environment, don't we? So understanding dependent arising makes that happen, because you understand that our welfare depends upon our environment. So if we want to be happy, then we need to take care of the environment. So in various ways, then even this life, even in the short term, understanding dependent arising is really quite useful. No. Now we'll move on to the practices in common with, the practices of the person of great scope. So this means verse 10. Verse 10 says, when mothers who have been kind to one since beginningless time are suffering, what is the use of one's own happiness? Therefore, generating the mind of enlightenment in order to liberate sentient beings is a Bodhisattva's practice. No.
Adi uteri sha ngonzo changju sem gizu tele ya ani gyunde menga dungo ne gizu jidan da xingyamju go ne gizu ni cheje da xingyamju go ne gizu o de yongdu da di gyunde menga dungo ne changju sho de sem gizu de odo ze sha.
This is talking about how to generate bodhicitta, the awakening mind. And actually, there are two ways of generating bodhicitta. There's the seven-fold or seven-part cause and effect instruction. And then there's also the way of generating bodhicitta by equalizing and exchanging self and others. Now, that second one, that's going to come later. Right here in the beginning, it's talking about how to generate bodhicitta through the seven-part cause and effect instruction. No.
Oh yeah. Da dini 통마 매면서 코바 통마 매바네. 저 코베 통마 디 사지 주야요 말. 먼저 다 dini 깨바 되지 망골렘 봐 봐. 깨바 망골렘 비인사. 아니 통미 되네. 다를 잡아 진심이 땅이 되게. 다 심지 현다 되서. 우랑 파마 체용을. 랑 깨바 망다 춘 가사 갈게 비인사. 파마 체용 팅기짱짱배 팅진 되게서.
It says in this verse, mothers who have been kind to one since beginningless time. So there's no beginning to cyclic existence. There's no point that you can say this is where it began. It's completely beginningless, and because of this, we can understand we've had countless lives in cyclic existence, so many lives in cyclic existence. And then what that leads us to understanding is that all sentient beings have been our kind mothers and fathers. No.
What is that? That's couple some because some of the regret machina Hakuma Karisana. Any Rang Keval Tangmeva. What is Shevchor? Karisana Ranzu, Ruin Dagara, Kevangamani Yoma Sigma, they did Pamekurani, Kuchum. Yinea, any Maranzo Pumbu, Sugu Pumbu Sandi, that the Kevan Denishon already Inea, and Pumbu Chimashirva. So we do you number the Pumbu Chimashi Teviama. The Kevangamanima, the G Green, so Nashi Zore, to Sion Yinza, any Tomam Nevas, or to say.
This is a little bit difficult to understand if you don't get the reasoning. So let's talk about that a little bit. So the thing is that we've had numberless lives so far in psychic existence. So as far as the physical body is concerned, sort of the 5 aggregates, we talk about, the form aggregate, and then the other 4, the form aggregate. So that's our body. So that's something which you can trace it back to the fertilized egg, from the mother and father. So we can say that this body began in this life. So that's okay. But there are the remaining 4 aggregates, the aggregates of feeling, discernment, the compositional factors or compounded factors, and then the 5th aggregate, the aggregate of consciousness. So these remaining 4 aggregates, especially the last one, the consciousness aggregate, this didn't start in this life. This actually has a continuity going back before this life. No.
Oh, yeah. That didn't mana do not have dishes. That there's a range teach with Danny, Gawa there's a man when they can teach you to get any Kasore. Kovena, you shani. Kove doing it, Kovena to Mama, you shani, Ranji would have a top chain. But when we took Nero Ranjigo, Ran, Shen you and Ran the Chena. Digmaris only. Jishas, Maruma Sheraresta, Yamati, Yangi, you, Ranchigo, Tindonite, Gudame, Silva, or Jishas, Digmaris only.
And so, how awful it would be to just think of our own liberation and leave the sentient beings in samsara. So what does it say there? It says, what is the use of one's own happiness? So that's what I'm talking about here. What is the use of one's own happiness? What this means is that it would be totally reprehensible to think of just oneself. We understand the ultimate nature of reality. Through that, we achieve liberation, and leave all of the sentient beings to suffer in samsara. Because if you leave them in samsara, then there's nothing for them but to suffer. So to do that would be really, disgraceful. No.
Why? Teacher, Thai SMJ Dejechis. Chazang, Tindig Morum Chen Digmari, Taka Gumze Karesana, Ram Tin, Tanga was Simjishana. Chazang Digi Chedo, Thai was to Samba, Nange Tatayam, SMJ Dinas Osai, or Digi Chedo. Any Tigi Tarwating de Vokoya Chedo, and Sange Goma. Tony Gores, Sange Topsa Tatu Sange Goma, Tony Gores, Digi Sela.
So that would be disgraceful, right? To just achieve one's own liberation and leave all sentient beings behind in samsara. And so instead of that, then, thinking of all the infinite sentient beings who are equal to the extent of space, the endless number of sentient beings, for their sake, we must strive for the ultimate goal of enlightenment, so that we'll be of real benefit for all those sentient beings. No.
我往底下，就当太不透，等于等个太不透呢，甚至同其他几个的三界之前呢，被哈张冲冲的，그래서呢，这个年呢，명무这个帮的嘛，都世界这个帮的嘛，这个年个帮都有，加上，아니甚至同前面同你是吧，哈张用嘛都全部齐都嘛。
It's true that if we were to attain the lasting happiness of liberation, our own personal liberation, we would be able to help sentient beings, but we would only be able to help a few sentient beings and in a very limited way. Whereas if we achieve enlightenment, then we would be able to help so many more sentient beings, and we would be able to help those sentient beings so much more. And the reason for this is when you've only achieved your own liberation, of the two types of obscuration, you're only free of the afflictive obscurations. You're not free of the knowledge obscurations. Whereas an enlightened being, a Buddha, is free of both of those obscurations. No.
面对的，都能够，以那样这个扩张着吧，这个他不拓展，这个我打算把我们拓展就嘛到三界我们国度样嘛的，阿里贝尔学面能眼嘛，那点马嘎不是，空给，那估计得了呀，空大众的话大众不同的，空估计得了呀，那杀来马都把抓结，就怕都把抓结。 파존 너무 좁게 간단 너무 좁게 수도 사실 등등 붙은 다시 뭐라 봐. 아니 수신서는 내가 자가 된다 네가 수도도 말 수신전에 수도야 신지도 봐. 등상 요래 신지. 서로 시에서 간다 들으시. 수신비 장기 최대네 아니 샘지 순대시네 미순대시네 아니 타버다가 땡기다버 터버다가 아니 수신대를 이용이 간다 꾸지 될래야 디기 사제 가침보 디기 베트 신 조조지야 따다 가마 우 딘디지 된다 나요 타발 거야 이내야 상계 거야다 춘대고요 그때 상계 거야 전에 돼서 큐 각게 된다 첨부 말해 이내 근데 나랑 시엔다 된다 첨부로 봐 항상 해봐 사연 문제만 없다
No. So the thing is that as a hero, so we have the hera arhats, the two types of hinayana arhats. So one is called the hera arhat. So they are able to lead sentient beings to their own level. So they're able to lead sentient beings to liberation, but they can't lead them to enlightenment. So to give you an idea, there was an arhat called, a hera arhat called Magagpa. So he dug out this pit, this vast pit, vast pit, so 18 domba, I can't remember what this is, but anyway, this huge pit, he dug out a huge pit, very deep, very, very wide. And so every time that he led a sentient being to liberation, then he threw in a stick. It's like in the old days a toothbrush, a piece of wood for cleaning the teeth. So it's about like 4 fingers long, that kind of that big. And so a piece of wood he would throw into this pit. And during his life, he was able to completely fill that pit. So for us, it's like unbelievable that he would be able to lead so many sentient beings to liberation. But actually, in comparison with what the the way that a Buddha is able to help the sentient beings is actually quite insignificant, the amount that he was able to help sentient beings. No.
Yeah, what is it? 제가 다 상계 고만 탐나 진미 용서 방치 말. 대선장 심지 감도 매바 치마 지신티. 에는 심지 된치 바는 매수 잡아내면 매수. 에 심지 가와 근데 된치 보시면 어디 뚜버 집어 팀보 망고 다가나 코로나 됐어. 매수 매바 뒷나마도 아니 년도는 신가 강에 좀 된데 그 수지요 말. 대선장 아니 그 나라서 제가 되게 된다라. 심지 탐지 땡이 되고 거야 치도 상계 고만 던지냐. 그거랬어.
If you're a fully enlightened being, if you're a Buddha, then your mind is completely clear, being free of all obscurations, and so you are fully aware of the different capacities of sentient beings, the different interests of sentient beings, and so on. And without any effort at all, you can send out emanations to help those sentient beings, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. You can send out so many emanations to help the sentient beings. And so for this reason, then, by seeing how much you're able to help sentient beings by achieving enlightenment, then we must develop this determination to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all the sentient beings. No.
어떻게 제가 상계 고만 탐나 심지 그 된치 바를 켰네. 그 뒤에 이해와 매봐. 어디래 임래. 다음에 년도로 지나. 고지들나 안되네 에 타베신들 그 타베신께도 그러봐. 명만에서 타베신이야 돼. 나 이게야 한 몇년도 고봤을 때 쇼. 로 책마다 로 사이사이 원에 타니 깨버져 봐. 디스티션 집에 대화 침봉하는 쇼. 손들라고 할 거 아니야. 어떤 년도 고봤어도 근데 쇼네. 주저 망고 쉽지. 근데 스타간다 타베 대발을 대대 그. 심지 된치 용용 뭐 되는 sonda 아니 단다 비게 년도 비게 다 타바 짬 타봐야 돼 특징 남 되네 등 가지 차로 심지 되는 차로 쉽지 랜도 거야 봐 그렇잖아.
If you're a Buddha, then you help sentient beings like unwaveringly, unceasingly. Now, if if instead of that you become a hira arhat, so because of having no afflictive obscurations, you can be born in a pure land and remain in meditation, enjoying the peace and the bliss of liberation for billions of years. I mean, trillions of years. It's like, for eons and eons. With in that state of cessation, experiencing that state of cessation where all of the coarse feelings and perceptions completely cease. So you just experience that, helping sentient beings. So you only help the sentient beings in a very limited way. And so for this reason, actually the state of, the goal of the hira arhat, in other words, just achieving one's own personal liberation, is considered, from the point of view of the Mahayana, something to completely avoid. No.
내가 사조 난데 잠바 년도 과거지 또 과거 수대 년도지 아니 베트텐데 답에 띵지 쇼쇼브라도 티찬 아니 콩 오즈다 베티틴 상계 위송 쇼여스 영아만 상계 위송 망하면 되잖아 아니 개부티지 여러분 개부티지 당망하면 되잖아 영 단도 상계 좀 되게 아니 되게 대한 베 상계 좀 되는 양에 대해 수된 어디 때문에 되었어 항로 산 tindechi ta tiri shubu lugi yore.
No.
continue ta ta vision pe lu gyu che san wo de song zang nin de zu pa pa le be de se tu ring bu de shu de sang ge guo ba to be la xiu guo de gu se to chen guo de gu.
No. One really awful thing about the becoming a hera arhat is that it really delays your own achievement of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings by a huge amount. It's just huge delay to benefiting sentient beings. So there's a story about the time when the Ganden monastery was being built at Gopuri, something like that. Anyway, in Tibet, and so while they were doing that, then there was this hera. They uncovered this hera arhat, and this hera arhat. So he said, is the Buddha Ursung still here? And so he was told, no, he's gone a long time ago. This is the Buddha Kashyapa, gone a long time ago. And then he asked about the the king called Chiti. So he said, is he around? No, he's passed away a long time ago. And so they explained that actually this is the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, and Buddha Shakyamuni himself has also passed away. So this is, gives you an idea how for the vast amount of time that this hera had remained in meditation. So while in that meditation, then obviously not helping sentient beings in any way. So that's one reason why it's considered to be such. So important to avoid that. This is considered to be something to be negated in the Mahayana, because it really delays so much helping sentient beings. No.
Dikwe kasa ore ngendo lang do ji ngendo ji ma na ji ma 전주 sam de na ngendo turi lang turi sana ta de mi de ba de o to gu res en ge xi me ba san ge guo ban de o de to gu che da 전주 sam sa de sam ba sam bu de ge gu res dong ba ni to gu gu re yin ne ya 전주 sam gu sam ba gu res so to che.
The Maitreya, in one of his teachings, said that if we generate bodhicitta, then there's no way that you would be born in the lower realms. You would definitely be achieve births of high status and so forth. So he talked about these, various benefits of generating bodhicitta. So what he was saying is that we do need to meditate on emptiness, but that meditation on emptiness needs to be supported by the practice of bodhicitta. No. 주직래 로.
이제 뭐 봐. 어쩌지 못해. 동네 말이 다들 들으시. 저거 상기 신배선이 게 신배선이 총하래요.
대지가대.
저거 신배선 대체. 다들 신도 동네다 야다지와 계세라는 있어요. 도시나. 다들 신이 동네다 야다지와 계세라는 있어. 네
Now we go on to the next verse, verse 11. So this is about the second way of generating bodhicitta, which is called equalizing, exchanging self and others. So what it says is, all suffering without exception comes from wishing for one's own happiness. The perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. Therefore, completely exchanging one's own happiness for the suffering of others is the Bodhisattva's practice. No.
我呀，我的这些他扩变了，空中扩变了，我那说东年原也刚刚长嘛，东年嘛的打电对了些，打电做的等人穷的，一年啊，他得让经济要的，我的是呢，贴了穷的是，我东年干嘛些用着，贴了穷的是，什么贴了穷的是。
No. This is saying that all of the suffering that we experience in psychic existence comes from the self-grasping mind and the mind of self-cherishing.
哦呀，哦，作为商业先边什么的重视，他商业国嘛啥的，这个是一个特别特度，让他买不肯定用这个的是呢，你先边我强人际关的重的是。
And then it says, yeah, the perfect Buddhas arise from the altruistic mind. So what that means is the state of Buddhahood comes about through depending upon the wish to benefit others, the attitude wanting to benefit others. In other words, what it comes from, what enlightenment comes from is loving kindness and compassion. No.
我呀，哦，这些人，这些大的行为都没得，让大家把解释了，你是，他经济顶得上印章，开上了，他穷肯定都是呢，顶得预备印章，你大的行为都没得，让大家把解释了的意思。那看到多对呢，经济的，我让可能这把这些也把头，顶得应该经济的他，谈到可能是三百块预备单，先这把这强把的人气的，哦，强人气，我的让怕头呢。我的看到听的是经济人不的，把结果什么的国家的说。
Because of that, then in brief, instead of cherishing oneself and neglecting others, we should switch that. Neglect ourselves and care for others by generating loving kindness and compassion. No.
那你进入那地方了吧？大家的心给动的大，养大就话马些呢，三个人就是花不那样，对吧？没事，送的，加上这个大家对吧？就问的，先把也把多呀的，那么上不当的，你就不是当的，你先这个动员来战斗的，人就抢不当，先对吧？了关这个这个战斗的抢吧，我定的是这样的。我这个上把的就把马当的呢，上把的有马当呢，三个全吐马的是，特别是头三个国王的吐马的，跨把了那边保住来，当对吧？要马的是东面马多，要马的是，但他上把的就不当呢，那个跨把了那边那个南线，毕竟我出过来送。
It's like it says in the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life that unless one is able to exchange self and others, enlightenment will not be possible, and even while we're in psychic existence, there will be no happiness. And so what this means is that if we only think of ourselves and if we only think of ourselves and neglect others, if we don't exchange self and others, caring for others, neglecting ourselves. In other words, if we don't generate loving kindness and compassion, there's no way that we'll be able to achieve enlightenment. And even while we're in samsara, up until we achieve enlightenment, there will also be no happiness. No.
我都这样，他到我这还写个人，你跟着人呢，这个人这个哪？No.
I'm going to stop my explanation at this point and take questions. If there are a few questions, I can deal with those. Try to answer those.
Yes, for any panelists here who is ready to ask questions to Pari Rinpoche, please.
그래서
Oh, this are the tanda de digan le yekindozo, nyengendozo, ani the diwa yana the jiro chis.
그래서
Na,
그래서
diwa yasmare.
If not, I have another one from the inbox, from the messenger. They ask questions.
Yeah, go ahead. The me that because the tanyores, it do tanyores, modi kalila logius, and
Oh, that's-
no, yeah.
There are 3 questions.
Okay.
First question: how can a practitioner tell if they have had directly realized emptiness as opposed to the conceptual realization of emptiness?
The Rinpoche the chidang condition sumyus the dambudik dires then nanzo the nyamlin chedu nyamlin chegin dozogi and the chidang jana the toni ngonzo to toya tang and it ngonzo mai be the dunji the sugi and it cause the toni toya yoro ngonzo mai be jesang ngonzo gula and it Tony Dobeloti and a Gunsum Yina Gunsun Re, that the Gunsum Mai, but the Dunji again the rest, Kandisako Gres.
맞아. 네 소소 동의 또 있는 소소 하고 그걸 받더니.
Well, the thing is, if you have realized emptiness, then you will know yourself whether your realization is a direct realization or a conceptual one.
난다 지게토네 제바체니 아니 띵중사 띵데레 띵중선자 라왕가 매바 동반이사데 띵데 제바체 디거도다 토마 아니 가레선 튼신된 도그레 마도 제바르바 제바도 도르바 배 지게코네 무슨 도야 말에 무슨 도디 탄다도 콤니 타카라 베디 콤니 아니 무슨 수드베 치마치신 뭐 잠바도 없어 뭐 디리타디랑 거마도 하고 말
What you do is you try to understand emptiness by analyzing, by relying on the reasoning of dependent arising, which means understanding there's nothing which is independent. And so then eventually through your analysis, you will gain an insight into emptiness, which will involve a kind of what we call a mental image or meaning generality. And so that would be how things would be in the beginning, because initially your realization would be what we call an inference, or an inferential realization, an inferential understanding. So that wouldn't be a direct perception. And then if you keep meditating, eventually you would get a direct perception of emptiness. And at that point, your understanding would be very precise and it would be like a bare perception, a naked perception. And so, only you would know if that's happened, if you've reached that kind of level of insight.
Oh, yeah.
No. Okay. Then next question.
That's all.
Fenty. Hello, Fenty. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
That's all.
Oh, sorry, I have to on my.
Yes. Mute.
Yeah, the second one is what are the characteristics of being realized emptiness directly?
Rinpoche the Tony Ngunzu do tobe lo de la ane kechu kare yorela.
가소래. 동ning 무슨 도비는 다 파괴 강사스를 봐. 깜내 차베 라니 강사 동겐티. 깜내래. 아니 그래서는 다 티부 침부체 동ning 무슨 돈이 자생 파괴스래. 뒤에는 아니 비게 가소래. 다 가소래. 동ning 무슨 도비인자 现在面这被搞不清不晓，我那他呢，我的搞不清不晓些，被我听通用没通那么啥的，图了吧？我点切，但是那东西我送到吧呢，切，就旅行不当啥的要吧？我的点呢，错误要的，可是呢，旅的东西要嘛的，旅的东西要嘛的，什么要嘛的，我可能呢从都等于，就算上。 他看到我对这里头想了
，No. Once you have a direct realization, in other words, non-conceptual realization of emptiness, you become an Arya. And in that case, that means you're an object of refuge, you're a source of refuge for others. In terms of the Mahayana, you would be an Arya Bodhisattva at that point. And you would experience a huge amount of joy in the mind because of having seen this truth that you never seen before, and you would have achieved the path of seeing. Of the 5 paths, you'd have achieved the path of seeing, and from that point onwards, then you're permitted to practice generosity of your body because there's no suffering at all, and because you have no miserliness. No.
And because of that, certain boy in the Shirayarva, Sanjay Shingam, be Galo Soba, to Gizilva, Sanjay Shingam, be Garakashipa, Bayat, and Sanjay Jaran even Damania. What that is so in the Mangoyota, Monetane, she in the chamber.
No, in fact, when you achieve that initial direct insight into emptiness as a bodhisattva, on the first ground, then you have many qualities, like, for example, being able to go in one moment to 100 different Buddha fields and receive instructions from 100 Buddhas, and there are many other qualities. It's really quite amazing.
Oh yeah, I like it. Carry in a minute. And Tonga Toyadi, Lamashuni, teaching Kazayina. Pay a Lamashuni, Tonga, Tongin the Tossers, it has Jabachan. One the way in Dobby Cherry, who do we in a resident yet a model? Any Lamashuni, the Lamashukone, Tomanito, Tomi Toyadi, Jida, Tomaji, Calico, Tapujo, the Inia, Chanju Sam Gada, the Dini Chevin, this Shirag Mura, let have a song, Tomani Toyati. 강의시다 요마스. 그래서 동문이 또 보고요. 단어도 관계 되게 전부 시라래.
Now, in general, most people before entering into the path, in particular, when we think of the Mahayana path, most have already realized emptiness before they've entered the path. In other words, before they've generated bodhicitta. So what this means is most have sharp faculties. So a sharp facultied practitioner realizes emptiness before they generate bodhicitta. So there are a few that are what we call dull facultied practitioners, and so they wouldn't realize emptiness before before generating bodhicitta. Otherwise, most would. And so this, realizing emptiness anyway, of the two, realizing emptiness, although realizing emptiness is difficult compared with bodhicitta, it's actually quite easy. So it's really important for us to, put emphasis on trying to understand emptiness. No.
And next, maybe for Dr. Go, please, you can speak to Pari Rinpoche.
Rinpoche. Yeah, in verse 8, when Rinpoche explained about the small scope being
Rinpoche said that Buddha actually taught only the teaching for liberation and enlightenment, and people and the people are middling and great scope practice the small scope teaching so that they won't be reborn in the lower rebirth. So I would like to ask Rinpoche, for those people who from the outset, they set their goal only for fortunate rebirth in samsara, are they follower of Buddha's teaching? Thank you.
That's good. No, these songs are the Dagri no bed I swing chudi chata and the munition at the tapadan tamji kemba tobechidu sumberes, the sumberwala. That Dindina and tabala some matang, tamji gamala some matang, Kyabje yabu yom chedu samutang into the deep dichibo, Kyabje chibu. Koenala the any ladami kya chibulo samutang into the and a day chedu and yamlin chicken to the Nangpa Mares Labgorbes.
Kasa, Dichibula.
Oh, Dichibu. Koa, because of the Yamlin chedu, and because the Tabat and Tanshi Kemba chedu, Sani Samo Matawa ched, Kyabje Yang Yangi chedu, and it does she's Yamlin chena, Nangpa Mares Labgorbella.
That didn't know what I my Yokushi. Karesana, you were Chema, any Sadami, Kobang Tovia Chedomoto, Shamba, Tabash the Mogos. As one. Tindid the page in Nango Yumade. Karesana, that Sadami, give a Mongolian Sarva. Ni Neta Taba Tovia Chedo, Ningle, Casamilu, the Kabachi, Matalinde. But the Tovia Chedo, Castore. I give Chungu. Give chung the two most to Mato. The Kazan give chungaran Zembadi, Pejin Angoli, you mare. You mare, Nangol today, you mare. Teacher, another day, but then they should do, Yakuman. They use you talk about.
No, actually, I don't think there would be such a thing as a Buddhist who's only concerned with achieving birth as a human being or God in the next life, no interest at all in achieving liberation or enlightenment. I don't think so. I mean, of course, we would understand that in order to achieve liberation and enlightenment, we want to make sure to be born as a human being or as a God in our next life. So we would practice those, engage in those practices that are shared with the person of small capability, but there would be no, I don't think there would be any such thing as a Buddhist who's an actual practitioner of small capability. I think you wouldn't be a Buddhist and not want to achieve liberation or enlightenment.
Yeah, didn't know what mess. Yeah.
So in other words, there's no such thing as a Buddhist who would only be concerned with their future life and not liberation or enlightenment.
Okay.
No. So that's it, 3 questions, right? Fenty?
Yes, another one is, could Rinpoche clarify to enter the Mahayana path is shine necessary? What does it mean?
Shine, you mean Shine. Shine. Not shine, Shine.
Shine, yes, Shine.
Yes. So to enter the Mahayana path, right? Yes, no.
Yes, Shine.
No, okay. Rinpoche the teaching lam la shubala. Ale ding harol do ani the Shine top sawa guguges. No, No, you wouldn't have to have Shine, you wouldn't have to have calm abiding in order to enter into the Mahayana path. Some would already have it, some wouldn't. It varies.
Okay, then next is Venerable Robert. I see you are raising your hand, please.
Yes, the question is regarding, thank you, first of all. The question is regarding what it means to have bodhicitta, specifically if it is the wish to abandon the wish for one's own happiness, or the wish to take the happiness of others more important as one's own happiness. So the question is, so what it means to have bodhicitta, so the self-cherishing. Is it to take the happiness of others, of oneself, more important as the happiness? No, the happiness of others more important as one's own happiness, or is it the wish for one's own happiness?
Okay. Yeah, I think I got that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
If you have bodhicitta, having bodhicitta, does it mean wanting only your own happiness, or does it mean wanting the happiness of others more than oneself? Right.
So yeah, the question is, so the question boils down to is, so if so the self-cherishing, is it the wish for one's own happiness, and that does a bodhisattva abandon that wish completely or not? So does a bodhisattva still has the wish for one's own happiness or not?
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
I think I get what you mean. Yeah. That no. Rinpoche the chilanchena the rangjesingi lode ani the bangro ala.
No.
Rangjesin bangore. That janshugi sem yulikebala. Tene rangjesin ti bangogi san ani the rangden la rangden gi sambat sawani the pet bangor bes. Rangden rangiche do the yin samutayandi.
전주조도 선제 탐색이 되나 아니 내 상계 고박하고 지금 사줘라 봐. 어디 뭐 내주 전화랑 진짜 약속들이 그래도 된다 쳐부터야. 뭐 내주 가는 게랑 진짜 제 신예가 또 해야 돼. 뭐만 게 된다 제도고요. 어디래?
Well, bodhicitta means wanting to achieve the enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, right? So actually, this is the best kind of self-cherishing, because self-cherishing means wanting your own happiness. Actually, the best way to achieve your own happiness is by achieving enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So that, in a way, that attitude is the best kind of self-cherishing. Okay.
뭐래? 근데 전주선 받듯이 전주선 받다 오늘 상계 통계하고 대티 가려서는 에베게 신이 비게 가서 다시 참받던 이 때에는 뭐네 전에 신전 좀 봐봐. 뒤 전에 조배하데 랑거 전당에 담고 주셔야 된다. 랑도 카이라 라이사 두 봐봐. 어디 손자 뭐 진정 뭐만 티셔 버렸어.
So you see, the thing is that in order to achieve enlightenment, the Bodhisattvas practice loving kindness and compassion. And actually, by practicing loving kindness and compassion, bodhicitta, in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, then those practitioners are the ones that gain the most. It's like the best way of accomplishing one's own happiness, in fact. And so in that sense, we can think of that kind of attitude as being the best kind of self-cherishing. No. Okay?
Okay, now, Venerable Lobsang, please, Venerable Lobsang.
다시 들려 림포체 라 Kyabje duchegi dunya tata kareng ha ha maso kuches yapusurana. I didn't understand what is the omnipervasive compounded suffering. If Rinpoche can explain to us, thank you.
저 도시 동의사인데 아니 레뉴왕 개발란샤죠. 개발했네. 다또 말한서 코베난 독디 뉴질링고 알바류 어디 코베난 이게 내가 이거 뭐 what this one 이 켜버 두지 다 가려서나 깨버 뒤에 뭐도나 아니 켜버 두지 동네 여야 그래 깨버 지야 봐라 깨버 뒤 그냥 봐라 깨버 뒤 가네 정으로서나 처음에 머리 번지 머리 제가 뒤 머리고 매고 써봐라야 아니 이거 이 시기 오래 또 뭐니 또 왜? 단다 주내로 또 해야 돼. 뭐 딘데 체제. 딘데 tos잖아.
So the question, anyway, Anna already said the question is, what is this pervasive compounded suffering? So the answer is, it's what it comes down to is taking birth under the control of karma and the mental afflictions. So as long as we're in samsara, then we're going to take, a life or, like a body or, generally speaking, a body in samsara under the control of karma and the mental afflictions, the klesha. And so because of this, then, understanding that ultimately where our birth in psychic existence comes from is ignorance, then to reverse that ignorance or to eliminate that ignorance, we need the wisdom, which is the wisdom understanding the actual, ultimate way of being a phenomena. No.
도시 단나디 상계 좀 되게 니니 동네 밖에도 니 소화죠 봐. 커도다. 니는 꾸죠. 니는 과거인데 커도 다가 못해나. 니 딕시제. 아니 이게 가서 그래. 쉬디 퇴니 이게 못퇴니. 아니 동네 반에 타로 타야. 어떻게 충으로 봐. 이 대송이자. 이제 몰리는야 아니 이게 딘디 꾸죠. 그래서 지난 상계 좀 된 데들이 이내야 지난 말아서 미나네. 미다 해나네 들이 와야지 토만 못해 도 두스다 디니 소도 디레
So when the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, he said, this is suffering true for an Arya. So he pointed out very directly this, this is what suffering is. And so who he first taught about this to was, in our world, was to human beings and to gods. I think I got things the wrong way around, but anyway, he taught this, and so this is something we need to listen to teachings on and then practice in order to achieve liberation. And who he first taught it to in this world was human beings and gods.
No.
Yeah.
다가 이메다 아니 이 참말에 들에 제바 시라 가보죠. 단다 시라 참마서 아니 휴고야 고피야체 아니 단다 디타 내가 원이마 또 티고 침비추래 문에 다네 냠네 딥디간가 냠네 차 크도 기체 데리 다디디와 다 캬나서 차베유는 마 시나나 마고 시라도 요 말에 어디지 아니 거리지 상매 통나 첨부체 또 세나 봐 가고 시라죠 엔텐디 칠럽 텐디 탑요래 어디 쇼미 또 되나
So it's been, I think we can stop there. It's been very nice to meet you all. And so we didn't really get so far in the text, but that's okay. I can carry on a future occasion. After here, from now on in the text, it's all Mahayana, the Mahayana teachings. So then so those of you who have the text, I encourage you to read it. It's quite easy to understand. I don't think you'll find much that you don't understand. And although we didn't finish the text, there's still been a great deal of blessing, I think. So thanks very much. No.
도체나 다 가서래. 다디 조 처리나니 소래. 다가나기 다 송근나 봐서체. 다가나시 대평에다 망고시 뭐에 내서 뭐시야 비장자래샤. 아니 상마지야부터 계실라도 상마 지야부시다 가보충 계실라도 아니라도 망고패도 가다 제가 가보시라 중 아니 투치셔야지 개치셔디 나란주 독딘사 하시고디 리딘디 캬바친레디요 스타버드벨라 디선다 구소를 상매 최대야고 나로 나체 최대의 개침을 해샤 최대나 엔딩아 이게 냠시도 로존 집에 당문에 다 로존나 수만의 신체 남긴 냠시 난게 여라 냠내도 거두시도 난 엔디스 엔에 딱 와면 쇼유 더잖아 그런지
Thank you particularly to those who arranged. We turn that off? Okay, good. So thank you to everybody who arranged this event. Thanks to the translators, and thanks for the many other students who came. Thank you very much. Thank you to the. I see also the many geshis and many nuns attended the teaching. So thank you to you all also. The main thing is that this life that we have is very sort of like powerful tool for achieving liberation. So we have to take good care of it. We have to take good care of our health. And then really the most important practice is mind training. So please do try to practice the mind training as much as you can. And from my side, I will make prayers. No.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Pari Rinpoche, thank you very much, Pari Rinpoche, for this auspicious and precious teaching. We request, if possible, Dagri Rinpoche will teach us more regularly for the future, because many of us benefit more and more, especially for the whole world now. Please continue to turn the wheel of Dharma, Pari Rinpoche.
Rinpoche the Tujinans, Sunjati Yaboshida Johnson's Tujiches, that any Mambala Yanda Sunjuni Yani Yandu the Chik Narunans, Shuyus, Kaisna, Mi Mambol Pengidos, and it just under the Narunans and Tujinans, Tujiches.
That's all. The pentotion and the yin the yin.
No. Of course, if there is benefit, then absolutely, yes, I would like to teach current teaching. So thank you and see you again in the future sometime.
Thank you very much. Then we conclude the prayer for the mandala offering and a short long life prayer for Pari Rinpoche. Wish Pari Rinpoche long life and guide us always, Pari Rinpoche.
Thank you.
No, less.
Henry, Facebook.
No.
Zoi